Hello everyone, welcome back. And if you're new here, thanks for joining us. I just want to say that if you hear any snorting or snoring or ruffling of feet through any of these episodes, it's probably my bulldogs, and I apologize ahead of time. They're noisy little creatures, but we love them. Okay, so one of the things you've all been asking for ever since the last video is a full house tour. But rather than trying to fit everything into one long episode, I thought it would be much more enjoyable if we took the time and explored the house together. Today, we're going to start with the spaces we use the most, I would say, besides the bathroom. We use every single day: the entry, dining room, living room, the kitchen, and the pantry. Along the way, I'll share not only what we chose, but how we came to those decisions, because I really do believe good design is always about creating a home that feels good as it looks. So let's begin where every home does, in the entry. Let's get started. I've always believed an entry should give you a hint of what's to come. I didn't want people walking into a closed-off foyer. I wanted them to immediately feel the light, the openness, and catch a glimpse of the spaces beyond. Originally, this entrance was only going to have a single front door with one side light, but with 12-foot ceilings, I felt it needed more presence. I redesigned the entrance to include glass in the door, 2 side lights, and a transom above. That one decision completely changed the scale of the entrance and flooded the foyer with natural light. Living out here in the country, privacy wasn't really a concern for me. I wanted to embrace the light rather than block it. The exterior of the door is painted Benjamin Moore dark olive, still one of my favorite colors. But I kept the inside white so it would blend beautifully with the interior windows throughout the home. Underfoot is porcelain tile that reminded me of old European cobblestone. To make it feel even more authentic, I had our tile installer space the tiles farther apart and use wider grout joints than normal. It's a subtle detail, but it gave this floor so much character. Texture was also really important to me. I knew I wanted to incorporate vertical groove paneling somewhere in the house, but I didn't want it everywhere. This wall felt like the perfect place. It softens what would otherwise have been a very tall, uninterrupted wall, while adding warmth and interest. One of my favorite architectural features is the glass wall between the entry and the dining room. The original plan called for solid wall, but I didn't love the idea of walking into a closed-off foyer. By replacing much of that wall with interior windows, the spaces still feel defined while allowing light to travel through the home. You get this beautiful peek into the dining room that naturally draws you further inside. Scale was another big consideration. With 12-foot ceilings, small fixture can easily disappear. So I chose this oversized lantern to help to fill the volume of the space to create a stronger focal point. And then there's this sideboard. This piece lived in a previous dining room, and when we moved, I couldn't find the right place for it. After a few weeks, I finally looked at Daryl and said, "I think it belongs in the entry." His response was, "It's much too big." But because everything else in the space is oversized, the front door, the lantern, interior windows, and the ceiling height, I felt the furniture needed to match that same sense of scale. Thankfully, he agreed to humor me, and now I honestly can't imagine this space without it. I change the styling, from season to season, but the sideboard always stays. Sometimes the pieces we already own end up being exactly what a space needs. One thing you'll probably notice throughout this tour is that I don't believe every room needs to be completely separate. I love creating little glimpses from one room to the next because it makes a home feel brighter, larger, and much more connected. So with that said, let's head into the dining room. If the entry introduces the home, I think the dining room really begins to tell its story. I've always loved mixing old and new, and this room probably is the best example of that, I would say, at least throughout the house. Very little in here was bought all at once. Most of these pieces were collected over many years, long before the house was built. Let me show you some of my favorites. This room is really a collection of pieces gathered over time, and I think that's what gives it so much personality. The one piece I always knew would be part of this home was the antique pantry. I actually bought it back in 2017 from a little shop in Almont, Ontario called Tin Barn Market. It was the very first piece I purchased after we bought the property years before construction even began. I actually also purchased the black bench that sits at the other end of the table. It was purchased probably maybe 6 months after I had got the pantry. If you watched my last episode, you'll know the house plans changed several times. In the original design, this pantry was meant to live in the kitchen, surrounded by new cabinetry. But as the house evolved and became a little smaller, it no longer fit. Instead, it became the anchor for the dining room, and honestly, I think it ended up exactly where it was meant to be. Originally, it was painted a soft sage green, but once the house was finished, the color no longer felt right. I had it repainted in the same moody green as the front door and the living room built-ins, so it would feel connected to the rest of the home. Today, it stores all of my china and glassware, and above it are some of my favorite collected pieces, vintage baskets, and an old sign I found at an antique market in Paris. The words themselves don't really mean anything to me. I simply love the character of the sign and the fact that it had its own story long before it found its way here. I'd always imagined having a plate rack somewhere in the kitchen, but there wasn't enough room or a right place for one, so Daryl built these 2 smaller plate racks to frame the pantry instead, and adding picture lights above them turned them into one of my favorite details in the room. Finding the dining table took me much longer than I expected. I had been searching for an antique table with turned legs that could comfortably seat 10 people, but I never found quite the right one. Eventually, I came across this table, and although it was new, it had everything I was looking for, including extension leaves, and I loved its soft gray-green finish. Pairing it with woven chairs brought in another layer of texture and kept this room from feeling too traditional. The antique artwork between the windows is another piece I've been holding on to for years while we were building this house. The moment we moved in, I knew exactly where it belonged. Underneath, I added 2 tarnished platters just for a little bit of whimsy. One of my favorite little discoveries is this antique brass sconce tucked into the corner. I loved it the moment I found it. The only thing I can't seem to settle on is the artwork underneath it. I think I've changed it at least 3 times already, and I'm still looking for the piece that feels just right. The bar cart is actually one of the newest pieces in the room. Eventually, I'd love to replace it with something antique, but for now, I like the darker brass finish. It ties well with some of the older details. And finally, the light fixture. Throughout this home, you'll notice I like to balance antiques with contemporary pieces. I never want a room to feel like everything came from the same period. This fixture is made of concrete, which gives it beautiful sculptural detail. It's incredibly heavy, and we actually had to reinforce the ceiling to install it. And although it only holds a single bulb, I love the soft, moody atmosphere it creates in the evenings. I think this room really reflects how I like to decorate, mixing old with new and allowing a home to evolve over time rather than trying to finish everything at once. Now, let's head to the living room, one of the most coziest rooms in the house. This room was probably the biggest design challenge in the house, but sometimes the best solution comes from embracing what seems like a problem at the time and in turn creates something beautiful. This room was probably the biggest design challenge in the house. The obvious solution would have been to center the fireplace on the wall, but doing that would have forced the furniture much too close to the windows. The room would have been, well, balanced on paper, but it wouldn't have felt balanced to live in. Instead, I decided to embrace the challenge and design the fireplace and built-ins asymmetrically. Not only did it solve the furniture layout, but it also gave the room much more character. Asymmetrical fireplaces are something you often see in older farmhouses, and I loved bringing a little bit of that history into a new home. I also didn't want two identical bookcases on either side of the fireplace. I wanted each side to have its own purpose. On the left is a traditional bookcase with closed storage, but on the right, I created a cozy little bench where I could display one of my favorite pieces of artwork from a previous home. I added a brass picture light above it, vertical groove paneling behind it for texture, and a small bookcase beside it to complete the composition. The fireplace itself was always meant to feel substantial. It's 6 feet wide and stretches all the way to our 12-foot ceilings. I chose the same stone that I used on the front of the house and asked our mason to lay the stones further apart using an over-mortar technique. It gives the fireplace an old-world character that feels as though it could have been here for generations. Finding the mantle proved to be a challenge. I had actually purchased a beautiful antique mantle years before we even started building, but once the fireplace was framed, the proportions simply weren't right. After searching for months without finding anything suitable, I reached out to my friend Rob at Burned Wood, Bent Metal. I showed him what I was hoping for and asked if he could build something that looked old and full of character. He absolutely nailed it. Above the mantle, we chose a framed TV because I wanted it to feel like artwork when it wasn't in use. The simple sconces on either side almost resembled candles and helped soften the entire wall. Once the fireplace was designed and another challenge presented itself, where should the chandelier go? Normally a chandelier is centered on the fireplace, but because the fireplace itself isn't centered, placing the light there would have made the seating arrangement feel off balance. Instead, I centered the chandelier over the furniture layout and the living room itself. I always say that sometimes you don't center things on the architecture, you center them on the way the room is actually lived in. I think that's what makes a space feel balanced, and even people don't realize why. Because of the scale of the room and the 12-foot ceilings, the chandelier also needed to be large enough to anchor the seating area. The same thinking applied to the windows. Even though they're generous in size, they almost disappeared in such a tall wall. Adding transom above each window and above the hallway opening gave the architecture much more presence and helped fill vertical space. Some of the furniture in the room has actually been with us for over 10 years. Our sofa and bobble chair were both reupholstered instead of replacing because the quality was still exceptional. Throughout the house, you'll notice I like balancing fresh, airy spaces with richer, moodier colors. The deep blue velvet sofa helps anchor the room against the dark green built-ins, while the textural fabric on the bobble chair adds another layer of warmth. The swivel chairs are newer additions and make the room much more functional. They can easily turn towards a TV or back into a conversation area when entertaining. But my favorite part of these built-ins isn't actually the millwork, it's what's inside them. Over the years, I've collected vintage books, little treasures from antique shops, pieces from travels, and family heirlooms that tell our story. There are even tiny shoes that belong to Daryl's father, along with his old binoculars and leather bag. And between the windows hangs one of my favorite photographs, a portrait of Daryl's dad as a little boy. I like to think he watches over us every day. For me, that's what truly makes a house feel like a home. Beautiful design creates the backdrop, but it's the stories and the memories that bring it to life. Now, let's head into my favorite room to design, the kitchen. If there's one room that truly represents how I design, it's this kitchen. I wanted the warmth and the character of an old European kitchen, but I wanted it with all the function of a modern family home. More than any other room in the house, this kitchen reflects how I love to live. I knew it would be where our family would naturally gather, whether it was over morning coffee, preparing dinner together, or simply catching up at the end of the day. But my goal was to create a kitchen that felt light and airy without feeling stark or overly modern. I wanted it to have the warmth and character of an old European home while still functioning beautifully for everyday life. The sink wall was one area where I wanted perfect symmetry. I've always dreamed of having a kitchen sink centered beneath a window overlooking the property, and this was finally my chance. Because the window and sink are perfectly centered, everything else on the wall was designed to reinforce that feeling of balance. To give it more character, I combined vertical V-groove paneling with a handmade subway tile that has softly worn edges, giving it the feeling of age rather than looking brand new. The upper cabinets extended slightly beyond their bases, creating little open display shelves with gentle curved ends, a small detail that adds another European touch. Even the sink was chosen for its texture. I loved the vertical detailing on the apron front, and I echoed that same idea in other places throughout the kitchen. The sink cabinet projects forward just slightly and sits on curved feet, so it almost feels like a freestanding piece of furniture, rather than a standard cabinetry. To finish everything, I imported raw brass hardware from England. Over time, it will naturally patina, which only adds the character to the room. The range wall presented a completely different challenge. Because the hallway to our primary suite, laundry room, and garage is located beside it, there was never going to be a perfectly symmetrical layout. Rather than trying to force symmetry where it didn't belong, I focused on making the design feel intentional. I designed a generous range alcove that gives this wall a strong focal point without feeling overwhelming. It's finished in a faux plaster finish with inset shelves for oils, spices, and a few collectible treasures. This 48-inch European range was actually purchased years before we ever started building and sat patiently in a storage waiting for its home. It deserved to be the star of the kitchen, and I think the alcove allows it to do exactly that. One of my favorite architectural details is the antique beamwork. Because the kitchen is completely open to the living spaces, I wanted a subtle way to define it without adding walls. The antique beams create that transition beautifully. They frame the kitchen, they add warmth, and continue into the range alcove, tying the entire space together. Beside the range alcove, I designed ceiling to floor cabinetry that frames both the pantry entrance and the refrigerator. It creates a continuous wall of cabinetry so the entire elevation feels seamless rather than broken into separate pieces. The 10-foot island was designed to be as hard-working as it is beautiful. It has an L-shaped seating area, generous storage, a microwave drawer, and plenty of room for preparing meals. One of my favorite details is the furniture-style end cabinet. It's slightly taller than the island and was designed to look as though an antique piece had been simply placed against it. Along the seating side, I continued the vertical V-groove paneling and added a raw brass footrail inspired by European cafes and pubs. It's a small detail, but I think it gives the island a wonderful sense of character. Although I absolutely love natural marble, I wasn't quite brave enough to live with red wine stains, which I knew was going to happen. Instead, I chose a quartz that beautifully captures the movement and marble while giving us a little more peace of mind. Lighting was another balancing act. I usually love large statement pendants over an island, but in this room, they would have completely overtaken the range alcove. Instead, I chose a much more delicate fixture over the island, a handmade pendant over the sink that echoes the reeded detail of the farmhouse sink, and 2 contemporary lanterns within the alcove. Together, they add interest without overwhelming the space. The pieces that give this kitchen its sense of history were collected over time. The brass cafe curtain rod, the custom cafe curtains with their tiny floral detail, the vintage artwork leading into the pantry, and the collection of antique plates all help soften the room and make it feel lived in. I think those finishing touches are what transforms a beautiful kitchen into one that feels personal. This may look like just a pantry, but it's actually one of the hardest working rooms in our home. Originally, this was only going to be a small pantry, really just large enough to step inside and store food. But I'd always dreamed of having a true working pantry, or what people call a scullery. On the other side of this wall was an enclosed storage room in the garage. Since we already had a generous garage and another outbuilding for vehicles, I realized I could borrow that space and give it to the kitchen instead. That one decision completely changed how this room functions. Today, it serves as a second working kitchen where I can prepare meals, keep larger appliances tucked away, and during holidays, I often set up a buffet so family and friends naturally gather in here while keeping the main kitchen a little less busy. One of my favorite design features is how the doorway frames the window. I never wanted a traditional pantry door because I wanted this room to remain visually connected to the kitchen. Years before we built the house, Daryl and I found a pair of beautiful antique European bifold doors while antiquing in Toronto. We had no idea where we'd use them, we simply loved them. When it came time to design the pantry, I realized they could become stationary architectural elements instead of functioning doors. They now frame the opening almost like side lights, drawing your eye straight through to the window. Framing that window are two of my favorite light fixtures in the entire house. They're inspired by our antique pie plates with delicate candle sconces, and they bring so much warmth and charm to this little space. I also love how their soft blue-gray finish quietly ties into the color of my living room sofa and the European range, creating a subtle thread that connects different rooms throughout the home. I continue many of the same details from the kitchen: vertical groove paneling, warm oak shelves, and classic cabinetry. But I also wanted this room to have its own personality. The lower cabinets are painted a rich charcoal, while the upper cabinets match the kitchen, creating continuity without making the space feel identical. The dark quartz countertops add even more depth and make this room feel cozy and distinct. I designed the open shelves to look as though upper cabinet doors had simply been removed, another small detail that adds a little character. But my favorite part of this room is what I call my treasure wall. Instead of adding more cabinetry, I wanted a place to display the pieces I've collected over many years. Copper pots, vintage utensils, an antique lace apron, artwork, old serving trays, little treasures from antique shops, and even the occasional Value Village find all found their home here. Some pieces are valuable, some aren't. Some are family heirlooms, others simply made me smile. Every one of them sat in storage while we were building this house, waiting for the perfect place. But tucked quietly among them is the most meaningful piece in our home: a handwritten recipe from my mom. It isn't the recipe itself that I treasure, it's seeing her handwriting. We lost my mom when she was almost the same age I am now, and having that little piece of her here every day means more to me than I can put into words. Oh boy, that last little bit about my mom got me a little bit emotional. I had to take a minute. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed the first part of our home tour. More than anything, I hope you've seen that creating a home isn't about filling it with new things. It's about thoughtfully designing spaces that work for your family and surrounding yourself with pieces that tell a story. In the next episode, I will continue the tour as I take you through the primary bedroom, primary bath, laundry room, main bathroom, and a few other small spaces. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next episode.